Modders have long played a big part in the video game industry, bringing a broad range of content to all forms of gaming. From new additions to improving and balancing game mechanics to turning a buggy mess into a functional game. The impact modders have had is undeniable. We've seen old classics revamped like Doom with Sergeant Mark IV's Brutal Doom mod, poorly optimized PC ports fixed like Dark Souls, and even whole new games made out of an old game's engine just like Big Bricks, The Adventures of Square. The Adventures of Square is a standalone old school FPS game being developed and published by Big Brick Games. It is being developed on the GZDOOM engine, an enhanced version of the Doom engine id Tech 1. The first episode released November 7th, 2014, and the second episode released April 6th, 2018, with the third and final episode currently in development with no set release date. The Adventures of Square brings all the great fast-paced action and excellent level design of Doom and turns it into a colourful, childlike world filled with charm, personality and lots of puns to create the most imaginative and whimsical FPS game you are likely ever to play. And it is completely free to download and play. You take on the role of Square, a badass, cigar-smoking, one-liner spewing purple Square who is attempting to rescue Dr. Octagon after he is kidnapped by the Circle of Evil, a cult who will stop at nothing to gain total domination of the entirety of Shapeland. Only by rescuing the brilliant Dr. Octagon can the Circles be stopped from achieving their goal and the war between the shapes come to an end. The plot to The Adventures of Square is about as outrageous and silly as it sounds, but is a whole lot of fun regardless. But just like any old school shooter, it takes the back seat, only presenting itself when it needs to, primarily at the end of an episode. Aside from that, it is a game that is gun-ho throughout, with the exception of the occasional plot speech where Square will say something plot relevant at specific points. If you're familiar with the old school shooters, particularly Doom, then you know exactly what you're getting into, and it will provide exactly that. That being a plot that sets the theme, setting and goals for the player, and not much after that. So if you're looking for a deep and complex plot with equally as so characters, then you certainly are not going to find it here. The gameplay to The Adventures of Square is exactly what you'd expect from a game that is both inspired from Doom and developed on its very engine. The goal is to make your way through each level, finding the exit to proceed to the next while blasting pretty much anything that moves. The difference here is that while Doom was more about gruesomely slaying the demonic entities of hell in a dark and horrifying environment, The Adventures of Square takes a more colourful, happy and comical approach to it, as long as you don't consider shooting and blowing up shapes with faces extreme violence. Most levels revolve around having to find specific coloured and shaped keys to unlock certain doors in order to progress, just like in Doom. And then there are also tons of secrets to find in each level, and a total of 3 secret levels to be found across the 2 currently available episodes. Does it really get any more old school than that? Well, yes it does. At the end of each level, the overall percentages of your kills, items and secrets found are calculated, and you are given a rank for each depending on how you did. Along with that, it tells you how long it took you to complete the level, as well as Big Brick's time and the power time. It really doesn't get any more retro than that. It is all great and classic design. All the weapons in the game are essentially various types of paint guns. You start off with one pistol, eventually finding a second to dual wield. Along with the pistols, there are Uzis, a crossbow that acts like a shotgun, a quad barrel shotgun, a rocket launcher and a defibrillator. In the second episode, there is also an additional weapon designed like a staff with a triple wide spread shot. Of course, there are also grenades, which are essentially glass balls filled with green paint. All the weapons work really well. You get great feedback from them, so you always know when you're hurting an enemy, and they really are impactful, making you feel powerful even if they are essentially paint guns. The quad barrel shotgun is easily my favourite. The noise of it firing and the sound of it reloading is just awesome. The only problem I would have with the weapons is that there isn't one that is good for long range attacks, which becomes a bit of a problem in more open levels. The dual pistols do a decent enough job, but the further an enemy is, the higher the accuracy drop off is, so you are shooting in the general direction and hoping it hits. While the other weapons except the rocket launcher are useless for long range attacks, but using the rocket launcher on a weak enemy is just a waste. Aside from that minor issue, there is little to complain about the weapons, and they're all fun to use. The enemies of the game range from various kinds of shapes, such as the cannon jerk, a circle with a hard helmet and a cannon in its chest, the Uzi jerk, a sunglasses wearing special forces soldier with an Uzi, and the jetpack jerk, a big round yellow chuckling circle that uses a jetpack to fly around and shoot you, which makes a deep and explosive farting sound when it dies. Then there are the robot enemies that act as the majority of Shepples' security force, who have been reprogrammed by the circles to kill the other shapes. From a triangle robot with 2 miniguns to a rectangle mechanical monster with teeth to laser firing cylinders. There are plenty of varying and unique robotic enemies to face off against alongside the circles. In episode 2 there are a few new enemies introduced, such as what I describe as the milk monster and the milk eyeball, which are essentially the lost souls of Doom. In the layer levels there are also spectres, which are a ghost-like enemy, along with big robots that are a miniature version of episode 1's boss fight. Each enemy is unique and has their own personality and often comical lines and death sounds. They are well balanced and all fit in perfectly with the theme and design of the world. The boss fights at the end of each episode offer a good challenge and really feel like the final fight. The enemies of the game are really the stars of the show, as they really make the gameplay fun, enjoyable and invoke plenty of laughter throughout. It really is some of the most unique enemy design I've seen for quite some time. Then you have the power-ups that are found scattered throughout the levels, some in plain sight while others are hidden in secret areas. There is the happy face that increases your health to 200, the silly face that increases your armor to 150 and health to 200, the hot sauce that sets you in flames, making you super fast, invulnerable and able to shoot out fireballs at enemies, the devil sphere that increases your damage, the fizzy soda increases your movement speed, God mode that makes you invulnerable for a short time, the fishbowl that allows you to breathe underwater and in areas with no air, and finally the radar that reveals the entire map and for a short time shows all enemy locations and the likes. Most power-ups are different versions of what you'd find in Doom, but their functionality is the same. But the fizzy soda, fishbowl and hot sauce are really nice new additions that are unique to the Adventures of Square. They are all useful in their own regards and really help you out, especially in the higher difficulty levels. There's also an additional game mode that is available to play, that being Time Attack. The idea of this mode is to kill all enemies on each of the 5 maps as quickly as possible to get the best time that you can. While there are no leaderboards, at least at the moment, it is a fun little mode to play after you've completed the 2 current episodes and want to play a bit more. There's little to dislike about the gameplay of the Adventures of Square. It is well balanced and fast paced. The weapons, power-ups and enemies are all awesome and creative, and it is the most fun you're going to get out of an old school shooter that isn't Doom itself. The only reason you might not like the game is if you don't enjoy retro shooters, but if you do, the gameplay is nothing but a sheer joy. The level design of the Adventures of Square definitely understands what made the classic so brilliant. Each level is very unique, and throughout the 2 episodes you go through a series of different environments where it never feels like you've been to the same place twice. You travel through cave systems, factories, a city, a strange forest, a space station, and you even make your way across a moon where you need to have a fishbowl on your head to breathe. Now while that may sound frustrating, there are more than enough additional fishbowls scattered throughout the levels where you don't really have to worry about dying when the power up runs out. Overall it is really varied and great level design. One of the major differences between the level design here and that of the games it inspires from is that they're far bigger and have way more enemies. Some of the levels in the game are twice if not 3 times longer than that of any Doom level, and if you're playing in the higher difficulties can have hundreds of enemies on them. Despite the engine's limited capabilities, it handles large open areas really well, like chasms and big drops. Nothing ever feels off-putting or out of place. The only time when the engine limitations do kick in is when climbing ladders. It just doesn't feel natural and can be a bit hard on the eyes due to the 2.5D nature of the engine's graphical design, but once you get used to it, it isn't too bad. Words don't really justify the many amazing sights that you experience throughout the levels of the game. There are some really truly magical and unique places that you won't find anywhere else. It does have the ladder problem due to the engine's limitation, but overall the level design of the game is great. There's a total of 5 difficulty levels to choose from in the game. Essentially they work almost the same as the difficulty levels of Doom. Just like in Doom, they each have their own creative name to them. Easy is called Totally Square, medium is Let's Rectangle, hard is Ready to Rhombus, very hard is Collateral Damage, and the 5th difficulty is Cubular. For the best experience of the game, just like with Doom and all old school FPS games, it is best to play in the harder difficulty, in this case Quadrilateral Damage. The 5th difficulty, Cubular, is very much a difficulty for the more masochistic players, who are looking for an experience where they're going up against unfair odds. In this difficulty, enemies are much faster and deal more damage than normal while keeping up the enemy count that Quadrilateral has. Having such a range of skill levels means that anyone of any experience level can play the Adventures of Square. Easy for those who are unfamiliar with such gameplay, while giving the hardcore experience to veterans of old school FPS style. It really is great to see such a large variety of difficult levels and such creative names to go with them in a retro fashion that equals that of the game's design. The atmosphere to the Adventures of Square is simply brilliant. Throughout the game there is always this happy vibe going through it, and it has an equally as bouncy and bubbly soundtrack to go with it. Not only does the soundtrack fit in with the overall theme of the game, but each track fits in well with the levels and the environment of them. As you progress further into the game, it does take a bit of a shift in tone to that of a darker one, and the music changes with it perfectly to fit this new environment. Not to mention the changing tone building a great sense of climactic conclusion. You can't really help but bop your head and move along to the music as you play. Each track just fits in with each and every level so well, and because of that it just absorbs you into the game, which is what makes the atmosphere so important, as without good atmosphere it's hard to get gripped into a game. Out of all the games I've played this year, The Adventures of Square has so far been the one that I've gotten the most enjoyment out of, but a lot of that is down to my love of old school games more than anything. It's a game that has a development team who understands the ins and outs of the design of retro FPS games. From the level design to the protagonists and the characters, to the weapons to the pacing of the episodes. Everything is done just so well. The enemies are fun and creative, the levels are varied both in layout and environmental design, the power-ups are really cool and some unique, and the one-liners are sure to give you a good laugh. There really is nothing but good things to say about the game. My only real frustration is that the third episode is still yet to be released, as I really want to play more and see how the plot and what new and magical adventures await Square on his mission. But that is a good complaint rather than a bad one for the game, as it is just how much I actually enjoy it. It is a game I would pay $20 for and feel that it was worth every cent. If you love old school FPS games like Doom, this is an absolute must check out. And with it being completely free to download and play, there are zero reasons as to why you shouldn't.